My experience going to South Africa was particular and specific in so many different ways. Um, there were so many things that happened during that trip that were organizational errors, but overall, I think that the trip was amazing and we learned so much and we got to know each other very well. Um, Being a volunteer in a place like South Africa, where Operation Walasia was working closely with the local communities, was something that not a lot of people get to experience, and I'm very grateful that I did have the opportunity to do something like that. They were very graceful when it came to accepting help and actually inspiring a lot of us students to be participants in not only being aware of our impact in South Africa, but continuing that when we go back. And the students that came from different countries, we worked and talked a lot together about information that we learned about the animals. Like, we talked mostly about elephants and rhinos, which was very interesting because it's not really something that's talked about a lot, especially in Sweden and in school. So discussing the health and importance of preserving not rare but still a lot of species of African elephant and rhino in terms of poaching, and that they just seem to disappear because people are taking them, eating them, selling them, whatever, and it's not for ethical reasons or anything that can be controlled. So there are a lot of issues that we talked about in regards to how it's possible to control the population in a certain area, since we can't really and don't want to intervene with the natural movement of these species. So I think that something that really important that we took away from all the discussions we had with our lecturers, in especially in Balule, was that it's more important to create a network where we can talk about how we should be more aware of what's actually happening instead of actively trying to participate, because the problem isn't the lack of active participants, the problem is the overall awareness, and that most people don't actually know that this is a problem. And this became evidently apparent as one of our lecturers told us a story about when she worked at a farm with rhinos, and there was actually an incident where poachers came and killed several rhinos, and in the end it ended up with all of them dying because they only had one or two female rhinos and they took care of all the others, and they just had two babies. And it was horrible because she told this story of how the police came and they didn't seem to care about how they could fix the problem. And in the end, they had a lot of active participants helping out at the farm that weren't police, and that ended up helping them. But it also came very clear to them that if anything was going to be done, it had to be from the public side and not from justice. So what they did was actually they started to raise awareness about how these numbers about elephants and rhinos being poached, it doesn't include the collateral damage. So they're only talking about the actual animal that was killed in the process, but not about the 6-7 other rhinos that died several weeks after because they didn't have someone to care for them. I mean, animals are still complicated creatures and they need each other in order to thrive, just as humans do. They're not meant to live alone mostly, especially not rhinos or elephant. They all travel in a herd and they all have someone that is the leader, that knows where to go and what to do. So it's horribly sad that there are so many people that can't accept that we're sort of all in the same boat, and that it's not fair to well, morally it's not right to kill animals for your own good and for your money. And I think that's what we talked about a lot, and how we could try to help instead of contributing to larger companies that maybe only indirectly allow for this type of behavior. It could be really simple, like if you go to a store, you buy something, the money for that product goes to the workers, but the workers they're employed in an area where poaching is allowed or where poaching is encouraged, or it could be a hobby even. And yeah, it's just something that really became apparent during the first week, and it was something that we really talked about and reflected. A lot of reflection came from that first week, where all of us sat together in groups and really talked about how we could understand how these animals behave and why we're losing them so quickly. Other than that, the second week, since I was taking my PADI certificate, I wasn't participating in a lot of the discussions about ocean preservation and coral reefs. But since I was diving, I actually got to see these coral reefs firsthand, which was amazing. And the thing that's too bad is that we lost the GoPro camera that we had in our group, so we don't have any footage of that coral reef now. But just knowing that I went to a place that might not even exist in maybe 10-20 years is mind-blowing. That I actually got to be 20 meters below water to touch and to see coral reefs and fish up close that are species that are going extinct. Coral reefs are dying everywhere because people, tourists, a lot of them go and they don't think about that not when you pick something up on the beach because it's already dead, but when you go to the ocean and you might step on something and you don't realize that was alive. You don't realize that you're actually interfering with an ecosystem, with something that's living and thriving, and they need that environment. And it's very easy to forget that a coral reef is just a coral reef, but if all those would disappear, it's the home for so many fish and species and other things and flora that we don't think about. And if the coral reefs would disappear, then all these species would disappear, and it would ruin the whole ecosystem of the ocean. And not that was something that we talked about a lot, but I know that the groups that didn't take their certificate, they did discuss how it was possible for them to preserve this and how they could contribute by consuming less plastic and being more environmentally safe. So not buying plastic bags, they try to do things like shopping vintage clothes, being more aware of what you consume and what you actually need instead of just blindly accepting all this that surrounds us. And that's really the first step to being more sound in how we can contribute. And that's something that this trip has really given me, the power of being so reflective, because when you do see something like that, an environment that is so inspiring and so beautiful, I think that you don't have another choice but to start to realize that maybe if we continue to act like this, it won't exist anymore. And maybe my kids and my grandkids will never see something like that because our generation has ruined it by not listening to all these bells ringing about that we need to start being more careful.